Do you ever find yourself worrying about losing one of your best volunteers? I know we don't want to lose any volunteers, but I'm not talking about the ones who are kind of flaky already, and if they left, you don't want them to leave. But I'm talking about those ones that if they were to walk away, you would genuinely miss them, and it would create some havoc in your ministry. Hey, if you're new to the podcast, my name's Gavin, and man, it's so great to meet you. This podcast exists to help leaders just like you add more intention to your mission. And here's the setup for this conversation. I want to talk about that volunteer that just quietly kind of fades away. They don't quit loudly for sure. It's like they quiet quit, and the silence that follows them when they're gone really never resolves. I wrote a post about this today. It's at gavinadams.com. And we covered kind of the diagnosis of this. But in this podcast conversation, I want to kind of give you more of an audit that you can run across your entire church or organization. If you are a volunteer led place, this conversation is for you. And you can run this across your entire volunteer structure. You could do it this week. And I think it would really help you ensure that you are recruiting and, even more importantly, in this conversation, retaining those great volunteers, the ones that you hope to never, ever lose. Now, I don't have to tell you how much this matters, right? Especially if you're a church or if you're working in a nonprofit space, you are a volunteer driven organization. So, keeping great volunteers is, well, first, it's one of the best way to get new volunteers, but keeping volunteers is critical to your mission. So here's kind of a little bit of a setup then. So just do me a favor. I want you to picture a normal Sunday. We're going to do this as a church. So just picture a normal Sunday for you. Let's say your guest services is fully staffed, the schedule is covered, all the volunteer, things, everybody's in place. And on paper, everything looks honestly pretty good. Here's what's not on paper, though. Your best volunteer, the one who's been there for several years, just made a decision in her car in the parking lot before she walked in. And she made it 3 weeks ago, by the way. And this decision is something that she kind of decided. And the decision came basically based on how she felt about her presence. She felt like when she shows up and when she's volunteering and when she's doing the thing that you told her was important, she just feels like her presence doesn't actually matter that much anymore, or maybe to anyone. And she has not said that out loud to you, but she has felt it for a while. She maybe said it out loud to herself or to a friend or maybe to her spouse. And looking fine on the outside and feeling fine on the inside are two very different things. And we know this, right? Most pastors, though, we can't tell the difference until the gap shows up on a Sunday because someone else didn't show up on that Sunday. Maybe that lady who's in the car right now deciding if she should come back again. And here's the part that, and this may sting a little bit, but I think we have to say it. This isn't just, like a kids ministry problem or a guest services problem. This problem shows up anywhere a church builds a role around a task instead of around the mission. If you build any volunteer roles around a task that needs to be done, not around the mission we are called to accomplish, you are setting yourselves up and you're setting volunteers up to walk away, to quiet quit. Because the role most likely, to suffer kind of through this quiet quitting kind of thing, the role it's usually the smoothest ones that go through this. It's the ones where kind of people rotate in and out and really nothing seems to break when they rotate in and out. And in a way, you feel like that smoothness is a systematic strength that you have. And it feels good to have that as a system. But to the person on the other side of you, it can feel like the opposite. In fact, it's a sign that maybe no one's presence is actually bearing any true weight. So here's the question underneath all of this entire conversation. And it really is two kind of questions that pull maybe in opposite directions. One question, does this volunteer role currently function? That's a great question to ask for all of your volunteer roles, right? Not even just your ministries, but dig into all the different roles within each ministry and ask this question, does this role function well right now? For instance, is the schedule full? Is the task getting done? Does everyone know what to do? Call that, the operations question, and really almost every role in your church is probably going to pass that test. But here's the second question. The other question, this one's harder, and it's the one that actually matters the most. Here it is. You ready? If I swapped this person in the role, if I swap this person out for a stranger tomorrow with no training, would anyone in the room, in the ministry, notice a difference at all? Let's call that the wait question. Because here's the reality for every volunteer role in your church. A role can pass the operations question and completely fail the wait question, and you may never even know it because the schedule looks full. Everything is happening. The tasks are being accomplished, but we are setting ourselves up for a lot of quiet quitting. We're going to end up with lots of potential great volunteers who never become great. We're going to end up with a lot of great volunteers who leave because they don't feel that their position, their role, their presence matters. That doesn't carry weight. And weight is not a personality trait, right? Weight is a structural condition that we get to build when we create roles that are directly connected to the mission, roles that feel like they matter. So I mentioned earlier, there's an audit, and here's the audit. Here's what I would love for you to do this week, and I think you should do it as soon as you possibly can. I'd love for you to run the swap test across every serving position, every role, every serving team, right? Not just your high turnover ones, but for every role. Ask honestly, would anyone notice the wait question? Would anyone notice if this person got swapped out tomorrow with someone else with no training, and would it go just as well? Here's what I think you're going to find. The answer is going to land in one of three kind of buckets. Bucket one, some roles, right? And I get it, but some roles, nobody's going to notice at all if there was a swap. I mean, nobody would even notice. And that means it's not a role, it's a slot. If you can swap the role and nobody notices, it's not a real role, it's just a slot. And it really is a redesign priority even if you're not having any turnover yet. I mean, zero turnover today doesn't mean that no one's getting ready to leave. It just means they haven't left yet. So if you can swap somebody in and out, that's not even a great role. It's just a warm body in a slot. Now, second bucket, some roles people will notice, but nobody can tell you exactly why it matters that they are in this role. That's the weight question, right? The weight that kind of is maybe non-existent, or it's happening, but it's kind of happening by accident. And if it's happening by accident, it is really fragile because you're basically asking the person in this role to discover why this role matters. And some of them are going to figure that out on their own. Most of them won't. And like we said earlier, they won't tell you. Now, of course, there are also some roles that people would notice immediately, and they could tell you specifically what's breaking when they don't show up. Those are really your model roles. They're the roles you want to model every role after. You should study how that role got that way, and you should copy it and deliberately paste it across every single role that you have. And really, once you've kind of sorted out your teams amongst all these roles and that question, you've got a couple of jobs to do. The structural one is to build a specific sentence for every single role that names exactly what breaks if this seat goes empty. And this can't be vague, right? This can't be like, well, things will get harder, right? Like, I need you to think about it this way. Like, write down something like, this is an example, but a first-time guest child does not get checked in inside our safety window, and that family will never come back. I mean, that's how specific it should be for this role. Like, put that sentence in your next recruiting conversation and retaining conversation, maybe word for word. I mean, again, I'm going to play this out for a minute, but think about the people who are working in hospitality, guest services, whatever you call it, in your children's environment, maybe with preschool or elementary school. It could even be with middle school. And you know that role is really important. You know that it's critical. But the person in that role, do they feel like it carries any weight? Do they feel like what they're doing is mission critical, or does it just feel like a slot that somebody needs to fill? Here's the check. Ask that question, and it's going to fall into one of three categories. If the person doesn't feel any weight, you got to fix that immediately. If they have discovered a little weight, but they could still swap out and somebody else could swap back in and it wouldn't change much, that's not a good thing. You want every position, including hospitality guest services, to feel the missional weight between what they are doing minute to minute and the mission that you are called to lead. That's really important. So the next thing you got to think about is kind of more of a relational conversation, but and it's kind of urgent in a way too, because you got to figure this out just as much as the role description. If you've got some volunteers around and maybe they're longtime volunteers, and you find out that they have fallen into one of those kind of accidental weighty roles, you need to go tell them directly and specifically what breaks without them so that they can feel the weight. I mean, again, you want to look at the entire audit of all of your roles, and you want to kind of figure out which roles generically, are carrying weight, which ones aren't. I'm going to refix that, create a sentence that carries weight for them. But if you've got some important people that are sitting on those roles right now, they can't wait weeks or months for you to figure all that out. You need to call them today. You need to go send them a text, sit down with them over coffee, catch them on Sunday, look at them eyeball to eyeball, and tell them how much they matter and why they matter. Again, this is not a, hey, I want to thank you so much for what you do. It really makes a difference. Okay, that is so generic. I need you to look at them and say exactly what breaks if they don't show up. I can tell you from personal experience, and we'll kind of begin to wrap up with this, but when I was the lead pastor at Woodstock City, most of you know that I was 13 years lead pastor there. The first half of that, we were a portable church. We eventually moved, I guess a year into my tenure, into a more, it's still portable, but it was a semi-portable kind of situation. It was a school, but we had some permanent staging and storage there. So it's much better than the first year where we were driving, trailers, in at 5 a.m, right? So in that school, we began to grow. In that second, phase, we began to grow a lot. And I mean, we eventually went from, a couple of hundred people to about 1,000. And then we went from 1,000 ultimately to 5,000 before we moved into our first permanent building. And during that kind of gritty growth stage in the portable or semi-portable space, because we were growing so fast and because ministry wasn't easy there. I mean, listen, when it rained, we had to all exit one side of the building because of flooding. I mean, it was ridiculous and it was amazing. It was messy and awesome. And part of what made it so great was this, like there was a grit to it, a tenacity to it. Every volunteer felt that if they didn't show up, something could break. If they weren't there, then something wouldn't work. And it made everything about our church experience better. And you know what? We knew that was true. And so when we moved into the first permanent building, we tried our best to keep that with us. But I will tell you, it slid and it slipped kind of quickly, if we're fully honest, because you walk into a school where you're setting up chairs and all that to walking into a beautiful building that is perfect and everything works all the time. And it's easy for a volunteer to begin to feel like their role doesn't matter as much. So we worked really, really hard to maintain it, but it was hard to maintain. I bet you have felt some of that too. I don't know that I had these questions back then, but I do have them for you now. So ask those two questions, because here's what I do know, and this is true of you, no matter how big your church is, no matter how much momentum you have, there is 1, 2, 10, I don't know, core key people that you look to that are volunteers, and they are running this exact test on themselves without knowing the exact questions, but they are sitting in the parking lot, they are thinking about church on Saturday night, and they are trying to decide if their role matters, if their position carries weight. So listen, before next Sunday, run the swap test at a minimum on one team, one ministry space. If you can do it across the board, I would do it. It won't take a long time, but what you discover will position you to lead your church as if your mission is the most important mission in your city, because it is.